What is up, awesome peeps? Brent McCluskey here with Electrified Reviews, and today we are going over the beautiful and awesome Gocycle GS electric bike. This thing's got a 500 watt motor, an estimated 40-mile range with pedal assist, top speed of 20 miles per hour with the throttle or pedal assist. It has an integrated app, it has a kickstand, it's got pitch stop, easy removable wheels, it folds up, it's super compact. This thing is the dopest bike I've reviewed yet. We are going to go over the specs of this bike from end to end. We'll talk about all the features this thing has. We'll talk about some of the pros, some of the cons, and some things that I would like to see done differently in the future models. But first, let's roll the opener. We will start up here with the handlebars of the Gocycle GS. The handlebars and the stem are made from hydroformed T6 aluminum, so it's super durable, super strong. Now, the grips on this thing are soft, rubberized grips. They're really comfortable. They're a nice texture. They're not too hard. They're not too soft. They actually give you some grip when you're holding onto them. On the right-hand side of the handlebars, we've got the 3-speed micro shifter. This thing is super crisp with the shifting. There's also a nice little spread between the first, second, and third gear. So the first gear is really, really low, so it's great for climbing steep hills. The second gear is a decent jump higher, and then the third gear is quite a big jump higher, and it's great for going max speed around 20, 22 miles an hour with the pedal assist, with the throttle, or just riding it without the motor. We've also got the brake lever, which runs through the stem, through the frame, and then to the rear 140mm disc brake. Now, this thing has disc brakes in the back and the front, which I love that. I love that this thing has such awesome stopping power. Moving to the left side of the handlebars, we've got another soft rubberized grip. We've got the brake lever, which leads down to the front 140mm disc brake, and we've also got this little red button right here, which activates the motor. It's kind of like a throttle, but it's actually just a push button, so it only allows you to go one speed, and that's full speed. The middle of the handlebars is nice and flat, so it's a perfect area to put your smartphone. So with the Gocycle GS, there's actually an integrated app that goes along with this bike. You can put your phone right here on the handlebars. There's got a couple rubberized grips that you can put on here. It stows it nice and tightly, and then you can connect your phone to your bike, and it tells you everything that's going on. You can see top speed, average speed, max speed. It gives you an odometer. It gives you a tripometer. It tells you how much battery is left. It tells you what gear you're in. I mean, it gives you just tons of information on this app. And then, if we drop down a little bit further on the stem, we've got this quick release lever, which actually lowers the stem for when you want to fold up the Gocycle GS. And that's kind of one of the coolest things about this bike right here, is that it goes from this to this. And then if we keep dropping down on the front of the bike, we've got the T6 single-sided aluminum fork. The fork leads down to the motor, and this is a 500 watt hub motor. This thing is proprietary to Gocycle. These guys manufactured, and they actually created this thing specifically for the Gocycle GS, and the motor is actually really good. It's a little bit noisier than I would like to see. However, it's 500 watts, it's pretty powerful, and the 500 watt motor also brings this thing up to a top speed of 20 miles per hour with the throttle only or with the pedal assist. And of course, we've also got the front 140mm disc brake. Now, another awesome feature about the Gocycle GS are the 5-spoke injection molded magnesium rims. These are called pit stop tires, that's what Gocycle calls them, and with a couple twists of a couple levers, these things pop off, and it makes stowing this thing super easy. The tires themselves are 20 inches by 1.75 inches. They are smooth, slick tires, so there's no knobs on them. That's great for increased range, for increased speed, for a better ride feel. However, because they are slick, you're going to have a little bit less protection from punctures, but not a whole lot. And that brings us to the frame. This thing is just it's gorgeous. This thing is injection molded magnesium, bringing the curb weight of the Gocycle GS to 36.3 pounds, which is surprisingly light for all the features that this thing has in it. Again, the 500 watt motor, the estimated 40-mile range. This thing is super lightweight, and when you actually fold it down, it's really compact, and because it only weighs 36.3 pounds, it's actually pretty easy to carry around with you. Now, the only downside to having a magnesium frame is it's probably not going to be as strong as if it was a steel frame, so you're sacrificing some of that strength for the lighter weight. Now, because it's a magnesium frame, you've only got a 220-pound carrying capacity for the Gocycle GS. Not a whole lot of weight for somebody like me who's 200 pounds. That's almost already maxing it out, which means that if I want to ride within the specifications of the Gocycle GS, I can't really carry a whole lot of gear with me. So not a huge deal, but definitely something to note. Inside the frame is where a lot of the components for the Gocycle GS are stored, so it keeps it super sleek looking. There's not a whole lot of exposed wires with this thing because they're all inside the frame. Also inside the frame is the Panasonic batteries. So these things are 22 volt, 13.5 amp hour, and 300 watt hour batteries. They're good for about 1,000 cycles, and Gocycle estimates that with the pedal assist, you can get about 40 miles with this battery. Now for me, the real world range was quite a bit less. So Gocycle says the estimated range is 40 miles per charge. Now, of course, that's going to be with just the absolute best circumstances, right? A lightweight rider, no hills, no stopping. Now for me, I'm 200 pounds. I've got a lot of hills in my area, and I'm always running on the top pedal assist mode. So for pedal assist on a single charge, I got about 17 miles out of the Gocycle GS. Now I ran a separate test doing throttle only, and surprisingly, the range was pretty good for just the throttle, and I came in at about 13 miles with the throttle. The range was a little bit less than I would have liked to see given the 40-mile estimated range for Gocycle. I mean, I was kind of expecting somewhere around that range, around 17 to 20 miles, because this is a really small bike. It's not something huge like a Popolo. That being said, I would have liked to seen a little bit longer range on this battery, or at least a more accurate estimation on Gocycle's part. Charging this bad boy up takes about 7 hours with the normal charger, or if you want to go for the fast charger, it takes about 3.5 hours. On the left side of the frame is the quick release knob for the seat post. So with a few quick turns, the seat post pops out, boom, you are good to go. Now, if you do want to actually adjust the seat, you have a tool that is hidden underneath the seat, and it is a tool adjust, not a quick adjust. And that brings us to the rear shock. This thing only has rear suspension, by the way, not front suspension. I thought that this little thing in the front was actually suspension. It's not. So only suspension in the back, and this thing has 25 millimeters of travel. Not a whole lot of suspension, but you know what? It does the job pretty well. It dampens stuff like going off the curbs. It reduces the overall jarring when you're going on rough terrain or just streets that aren't super nice. Overall, the rear suspension gets the job done in my opinion. I mean, this isn't an off-road bike. This is an urban bicycle meant for riding around the city, and I think that 25 millimeters of travel is enough for what this thing is meant for. On the left side of the suspension is yet another quick release pin. So you pull this thing out, undo the suspension, and you can fold up this rear arm. You can fold down the stem, release the seat post, and this thing folds up to a really compact size. On the back of the frame is the battery indicator and the charging port. When the bike is powered down, no lights will turn on the battery indicator. However, when the bike is on, you can press the power button on the back of the bike here, and it will give you a quick readout of how much battery you have left. 4 red lights means you've got about 100%, 3 red lights is 75 or less, 2 is 50, 1 is 25, and then when it gets really low, it'll blink at you. And then we've got the pedals. These things are actually awesome for one simple reason. They fold up really easily. Now, that may not seem like a huge deal, but when this thing is folded up, or when you're trying to stow the Gocycle GS, having the ability to fold the pedals is super helpful for getting this thing into tight spaces. And right below the suspension, we've got the fully enclosed clean drive transmission. This thing is a work of beauty. So inside of this clean drive transmission, we've got a Shimano Nexus 3-speed derailleur. I love this because it is fully enclosed, which means everything is just tucked super nicely and neatly inside of this thing, so nothing is exposed. Honestly, I just love the way it looks. Now, like I mentioned when we were talking about the micro shifter up on the handlebars, the shifting on this thing is really incredible. From first to third gear, you can shift and it's super snappy. It goes right to the gear that you want to go to. There's no lag, there's no delay, and even when you're pedaling under heavy load and you shift, there's no hang-ups. It just goes right to where you want it to, and it works pretty much flawlessly. And at the very back, we've got another pit stop tire and a 140mm disc brake. At the very bottom of the Gocycle GS, we've got this double-sided kickstand, which is awesome because when you deploy this thing, it is super stable. And then when you want to fold it up, the kickstand tucks right underneath the frame and pretty much just disappears. Alright peeps, we have covered the specs of the Gocycle GS. Now it's time to talk about some of the pros. We'll put those up there, and some of the cons. We'll put those up there, and some of the things I would like to see improved in future models. Pro number 1, the micro shifter. Right, again, I really like just how snappy this micro shifter is, and I like the separation between the first, second, and third gear. First gear is really low, it's great for getting up hills. Second gear is great for just kind of cruising, and third gear is great for when you want to go top speed. And for the second pro, we are going with the motor. At 500 watts, this motor is more than powerful for getting you around town. Now again, this is not going to be a hill climber. This is not going to be a top speed performance bicycle, but with a 500 watt motor, it does get you where you need to go, and you can get up some pretty steep hills. Now, one thing I like about this motor quite a bit is that if you're struggling with a super steep hill, you can just forget about the pedal assist, hit the throttle, and this thing will carry you up just about anywhere you need to go. I also like that the spool up on this 500 watt motor is relatively quick. It takes about 1/4 of a second to 1/2 of a second for the juice to go from the throttle or the pedal assist to the motor. That's not that bad for a hub motor, which are kind of known for having those types of delays. Pro number 3, compact. I mean, seriously, this thing, when it folds up, it is so flippin' compact, man. This thing is so easy to carry with you anywhere you want to go. Now, what I also love about this thing is, besides the fact that it's super easy to fold up with the pit stop wheels, all the quick release stuff, this thing folds down and folds up in like 2 minutes, but I love that it comes with a carrying case that this thing snaps into when it is folded up. I was definitely surprised with just how easy it was to remove the pit stop wheels, take out the seat post, fold down the stem. This thing all is really, really intuitive on how to disassemble and put it back together. Another thing I was surprised with was just how stable this thing is when it is fully assembled. Now, you would think that because everything comes apart so easily that when you're actually riding it, maybe it wouldn't be super stable, it wouldn't be super sturdy, but that's not my experience at all. There's no play anywhere, there's no vibrations, nothing is loose, nothing rattles, it's just really, really solid. The next pro, I gotta throw it up there, is the looks. I mean, I'm totally digging how sleek this thing is. I love that all the wires are tucked into the stem, they're tucked into the frame, it's got the clean drive. This thing just looks like a race bike, or I don't know, to me this thing definitely speaks urban. Like, this thing says this is an urban bicycle, you know? For me personally, I just love the way this thing looks. I also like the ability to mix and match the colors. So from the frame to the clean drive, you can have 2 separate colors. So you can go gray and black, gray and white, black and white, gray and blue, whatever. There's a bunch of different colors you can choose from, and you can mix and match whatever you want. And for the next pro, we're going with the brakes. I mean, come on, front and rear disc brakes. That is awesome. And at 140 millimeters, these things are more than big enough for a bike that weighs 36.3 pounds. I also like that there's no rattle in the rear or the front brakes, and I like that there is no play at all in the brake levers. And for the last pro, I'm going with top speed. I love that this thing has the option to go 20 miles per hour with pedal assist or with the throttle only. It makes it so that you can actually get a workout with this thing, or you can treat it kind of like a moped or a scooter or something and use the throttle only to get to where you're going. I think having those 2 options, a pedal assist versus throttle, makes for a pretty versatile bike, and I think it works particularly well in an urban setting. Okay, we've talked about the pros, but of course, like any product, this thing is going to have some cons, so let's talk about the cons. The first, and definitely the biggest con for me, is going to be the range. Now, again, I think that for me, a 200-pound rider, 17 miles for pedal assist, it's not terrible, but given that the estimated range was 40 miles from the company, I just wish that it was much closer to the estimated range. Maybe somewhere like 30 miles would have been a lot cooler than getting something like 17. I know that if I decreased my pedal assist mode, if I wasn't going full speed the entire time, I would get a lot more range out of this thing. And if you guys are lighter riders, or if you're willing to do the same thing, you're probably going to get a lot more range out of this as well. But like I always say, like, if you've got the option to go full speed, why wouldn't you do it? If it goes 20 miles an hour, I'm gonna go 20 miles an hour the entire time. 17 miles on a charge is not the worst thing in the world. It's longer than a boosted board. It's longer than a lot of electric scooters. It's not terrible, I just wish that it was a little bit more. Okay, honestly, there's just not a whole lot of cons with this thing in my experience, so I'm gonna have to be nitpicky and we'll kind of throw some things up there. Con number 2 is going to be the fact that this thing does not have a quick release seat adjuster. So that means if you do want to adjust your seat, you're going to have to stop your bike, pull the tool out from underneath the seat, use the little wrench, and do it that way instead of a quick release. Not terrible, but again, I gotta be nitpicky. And for the next con, we're going with the motor. Now, I know I put this thing in the pros column, but it's also going in the cons column for one main reason. It's just a little louder than I would like it to be. With hub motors, one of the best things about them is that they're so quiet when they run, but for this one, you can actually hear it whirring. It's not the loudest thing in the world, but you can hear it, and I just wish that it was silent, or at least really, really quiet. And the final con is going to be the throttle, or the lack thereof. Now, I like that this thing has a push button throttle, which activates the 500 watt motor, but I wish it had an actual throttle that you could twist so you could set exactly what speed you want to go instead of just activating the motor at full capacity or not having it activated. Not a huge deal, but if I'm making a wish list, I'm going to throw a throttle up there. We've covered the specs, we've talked about the pros and the cons, and now it's time to talk about price and if this thing is worth the money. At $2,500 bucks, this thing is definitely not an entry-level electric bike. This is a higher-end model, but it comes with a lot of features, and I think at $2,500 bucks, it's definitely a lot of money, but you're getting what you pay for. The construction on this thing is just fantastic. The pit stop wheels, the fact that it has quick release levers everywhere to fold this thing up and make it really compact is a huge plus. And this thing just works fantastic in an urban setting. It's light, it's nimble, it's powerful, it's got a relatively quick top speed of 20 miles per hour. I mean, this thing is just perfect for anybody who wants to tear through the city on an electric bike. Now, there's also quite a few accessories that you can grab for the Gocycle GS. You can get a front headlamp, you can get a pannier rack, you can grab a docking station to make this thing easier to lug around when it's folded up. So who is the Gocycle GS for? In my opinion, this is for somebody who's looking to commute in an urban setting, somebody who needs an electric bike that is relatively powerful, relatively quick, and very nimble to be able to weave through traffic, go up and down curbs, just go through crowded areas. So for those kind of people, anybody who's looking for an electric bike for an urban setting, the Gocycle GS fits that bill to a T. I think the Gocycle GS is also for the person who is looking for something that is going to be easily stowable when they actually get to their destination. So like somebody who wants to get to their job, and when they actually get into the office, they want to be able to store this thing and not have to leave it outside, not have to lock it up, but they can actually take it with them. In just a few minutes, you can fold this thing up and you can bring it up with you. Well, hands down, the Gocycle GS has been my favorite bike to test thus far. Aside from the aesthetics alone, the performance of this thing definitely surprised me. It was more powerful than I thought it was. The top speed was better than I expected. The only really downside to this thing was the fact that it had less of a range than I was hoping for. But aside from that one aspect, the Gocycle GS exceeded my expectations in pretty much every single category. This is an awesome bike with an awesome construction, great materials, great components, and it's fantastic for anybody looking for an electric bike for an urban setting. Alright peeps, that is it for the Gocycle GS review. I hope you guys dug this review. I flippin' enjoyed reviewing this thing. I loved testing it. It was super fun. If you guys have any questions, please drop them in the comments below. And if you did like this video, please give me a like, please give me a sub. And of course, if you have an electric scooter, an electric bike, or an electric skateboard you want to see reviewed, leave that in the comments below and I'll see if I can get that going for you. Thank you again so much for watching, and peace.